Scale Economies, Imperfect Competition, and Trade. It covers Chapter 6 of your e-text. According to standard trade theories of comparative advantage, countries should trade to exploit the relative cost differences that arise from differences in factor endowments and differences in technology and productivity. Each country should export some products and import some other products, both different in nature. For example, a country that exports large amount of oil does not also import much oil, but rather it imports other products like machinery. According to comparative advantage, countries that are similar should trade little with each other, which is always not the case. Industrialized countries are similar, yet they trade extensively with each other. Why? Here, we will try to understand why industrialized countries trade so much with each other and why they have so much two-way trade in very similar products. For that we need to think beyond the assumption of perfect competition, which is a market structure in which market runs perfectly, buyers and sellers are well informed and competition is at its highest. Such markets does not exist in real world. Real-world markets are called imperfect markets. The chapter is divided into 3 sections. The first section defines and examines scale economies, internal and external. The second section defines intra-industry trade, IIT, in which a country both exports and imports the same product or very similar product varieties. The third section presents the 3 additional trade theories based on monopolistic competition, global oligopoly and scale economies that are external to the individual firm. The production process is when inputs are combined through production process to convert into some kind of output. In production process, 2 cost components are their total cost and average cost. Whenever input increases/decreases, output and total cost will also change. When input, output and total cost rise in the same proportion, it is called constant returns to scale, keeping average cost constant. With scale economies, output quantity goes up by a larger proportion than does total cost, as output increases. Here, average cost for producing a unit will decrease as output increases. Scale economies can be internal or external. An internal economy of scale measures a company's efficiency of production. That efficiency is attained as the company improves output when the average cost per product drops. This type of economy of scale is a consequence of a company's size and is controlled by its management teams such as workforce, production measures, and machinery. The factors, therefore, are independent of the entire industry. Large number of firms can join an industry if the economies of scale are moderate. In addition, if products can be differentiated, the resulting market structure is called monopolistic competition, wherein a large number of firms compete in production and selling of product varieties. If scale economies are substantial over a large range of output, then it is likely that a few firms will grow to be large in order to reap scale economies. If a few large firms dominate the global industry, perhaps because of substantial scale economies, the resulting market structure is called an oligopoly. External economies of scale are generally described as having an effect on the whole industry. So when the industry grows, the average costs of business drop. External economies of scale can happen because of positive and negative externalities. Positive externalities include a trained or specialized workforce, relationships between suppliers, and/or more innovation. Negative ones happen at the industry levels and are often called external diseconomies. There are several contributing factors behind external economies of scale. When competing companies set up shop in one area, specialized workers will seek employment. An example of this would be the IT industry in Silicon Valley, which has attracted a special set of skilled workers. Secondly, certain industries may become so important, they can develop bargaining power with politicians and local governments. This, in turn, can lead to more favorable treatment in the form of subsidies or other concessions. The oil industry has a long history of subsidies in the United States, which were historically given to continue a steady flow of domestic supply. There are 2 types of external economies of scale: a specialized supply of resources such as labor, equipment, and support services results into clustering of the production of some products in specific geographic areas and greater knowledge spillover among the firms in the cluster. There are 3 forms of trade occurring between nations: interindustry trade, intra-industry trade and net trade. Interindustry trade, A country exports products in some industries and imports products in other industries. For each industry, net trade is either almost all exports or almost all imports. Intra-industry trade, IIT. This is two-way trade in which a country both exports and imports the same or very similar products in the same industry. Net trade for an industry is the difference between exports and imports of the industry's products. IIT is the part of total trade in the product, exports plus imports, that is not net trade. The formula says exports plus imports minus exports minus imports. You must have noticed that export minus imports is in bars. Bars are used to convert the negative value into positive, so that intra-industry trade value stays positive. Intra-industry trade for a product is equivalent to twice the value of the smaller of exports or imports. The importance of intra-industry trade as a share of total trade in the product is expressed as intra-industry trade divided by total trade, which turns out to be more important for trade in manufactured products than it is for trade in agricultural products. Why do we see so much intra-industry trade? There are several reasons. Some measured intra-industry trade reflects trade driven by comparative advantage. For example, for some agricultural products, intra-industry trade may reflect seasonal comparative advantages. United States export cherries in July but import them in January. With increased standard of living, people may want an access over the variety of products in same line. Some buyers in a country prefer varieties of the products produced in a foreign country, so countries want to import them. Transportation cost and geographical location is another reason. Monopolistic competition describes an industry with the three main characteristics. A large number of firms each produce a variant of a product that consumers view as unique. The product differentiation may be based on branding, physical characteristics, quality, effectiveness, or anything else that matters to consumers. Each firm has some degree of monopoly power based on its established production of its unique variety. There is ease of entry and exit of firms in the long run. The example of monopolistic competition is automobile sector. The three key characteristics of a monopolistically competitive market for small compact cars with no trade in the US are: differentiation. The price that a firm can charge decreases as the number of models available in the market increases. The price curve, P, is downward sloping. Internal scale economies. Crowding of models reduces the ability for the firm to achieve scale economies. The unit cost curve, UC, is an upward sloping curve. Ease of entry and exit from market. In the long run, a typical firm earns zero economic profits on its model. This graph shows price and unit cost variations with the number of varieties that firms are selling in the market. With more models in the market, price falls because buyers have more alternative models from which to choose. With more models in the market, average cost increases because each firm will produce at a smaller scale. In the no-trade equilibrium, the number of different models is 10 and the typical price is $19,000 per car. If the world is open to trade, a domestic automobile company, for example Ford, can export their models to foreign consumers and foreign automakers in the rest of the world can export their models to the United States. With free trade, the world market is large and consumers have access to 18 models with $17,000 price per model. With a trade based on product differentiation and monopolistic competition, an additional source of gains from trade for the country is the increase in varieties that become available. Furthermore, trade may also lead to lower prices for the domestic varieties. The implications of trade for the well-being of different groups in the country are also modified. First, if most trade is intra-industry, then there may be little pressure on factor prices caused by inter-industry shifts in factor demand. Second, the gains from increased variety reduce the loss to factors that suffer income losses due to Stolper-Samuelson effects. Some may be better off even though they appear to lose income. In addition, increased international competition drives national production toward domestic firms with lower costs, a process of restructuring within the national industry. In some industries, a few large firms account for most global sales, perhaps because internal scale economies are large. Examples are Boeing and Airbus account for nearly all the world's production of large commercial aircraft. Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft design and sell most of the world's video game consoles. Companhia Vale de Rio Doce, CVRD, Rio Tinto, and BHP Billiton mine more than half of the world's iron ore. We can make several observations about oligopoly and trade. First, scale economies tend to concentrate production in a few production sites. When they were chosen by the firms, these may have been the lowest cost sites. Over time, production tends to continue in these sites, even though they may not remain the lowest cost sites if all sites could achieve the same production scale. Countries with these production locations export the product, rest import the product. In an oligopoly, each large firm should recognize interdependence with the other large firms. Its actions and decisions are likely to elicit responses from the other firms. Competition then resembles a game, but it is still not clear how the firms should play the game. If they compete aggressively, then they may earn only normal profits. They may be caught in the prisoner's dilemma of competing aggressively, unless they can find some way to cooperate. If instead they restrain their competitive thrusts, then they may be able to earn high profits. The fact that oligopoly firms can earn high profits means that it matters where these firms are located, or who owns them. The high profit earned on export sales creates another source of national gains from trade for the exporting country, in the form of better terms of trade, at the expense of foreign buyers of the imports. Our third theory is based on scale economies that are external to the individual firm but arise from advantages of having a high level of production in a geographic area. With external scale economies, also called agglomeration economies, an expansion of demand can result in a lower unit cost for all producers in the area and a lower product price. With free trade, production tends to be concentrated in one or a few locations. In the shift from no trade to free trade, production in some locations would increase so that their unit costs and prices fall, while production in other locations would decrease or cease. The importing countries gain from trade, even if local production ceases, because consumers benefit from the lower prices of the imported product. A key difference from the standard model is that with external scale economies, consumers in the exporting country also gain surplus as trade leads to lower costs and prices, because production is concentrated in few locations that can better achieve the external economies.